Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of games I bought recently. Now, before I get started, I just wanted to quickly apologize to everybody for the lack of videos that I've put out over the past month, and the reason being is I just transferred to a new college to continue my education, and between the commute in and back home, and it's a pretty tough school, most of my free time has just been going to studying, and if I have some spare time, I actually like to play some games in my free time, and yeah, it's been tough lately, finding the time to make videos, even record my podcast. I've had trouble doing that. But I just wanted to thank everybody for hanging in there, and I'm going to try my best to start making videos here again. I just had my midterm, so I got some free time right now this weekend, and I figured what better way to do it than to finally do a Games I Bought Recently video. Now, let's get started here. First up, I'm going to start with some modern games. And I finally got a game that I'd been putting off for quite a while because, well, I was waiting for the price to drop, and I was able to get this for, I think, like $25, which is like the exact price I wanted to pay for this. And that is Asura's Wrath on the Xbox 360. Now, I had played a demo of this game back before it had actually came out, and the way that the demo was presented, they made this game seem like it was nothing but quick-time events and hardly like any user input for the most part. But let me tell you, once you actually start playing Asura's Wrath and, put the whole story in the context and why you're doing these crazy, insane battles on, like, Dragon Ball Z proportions, I mean, this game is really over the top. It all starts to make sense, and I have to admit, I'm pleasantly surprised by Asura's Wrath. I really enjoy it. And for those of you that aren't too familiar with it, it's a game from Capcom. Just think, like, all the QuickTime events that you've ever done in games these days, like think Heavy Rain, God of War, pair that with like the over-top like battles of an episode of Dragon Ball Z, and put it into a video game, and that's essentially Asura's Wrath. It's sort of a revenge story. I guess it's not a spoiler because it happens really early on, but you play as Asura, and his wife is killed and his daughter is kidnapped at the beginning of the story by these 7 deities. And it's sort of, you get wrongfully blamed for a crime that you didn't commit, and everybody's out to kill you, and you're out trying to get revenge, and Asura gets very, very mad throughout this game. I'm a few hours in, and I have to say I'm really enjoying it. It's a pretty short adventure, but this is definitely one of my favorite games in terms of uniqueness that I've played in quite some time. I haven't played anything quite like this that really comes to mind. Next up is one of my favorite games of the year so far. I wasn't really following this game at all, to be quite honest, and it came out of nowhere. I just sort of watched some gameplay before it came out, and I'm like, oh my god, that game looks amazing, and that is XCOM Enemy Unknown. This is out on the PC, PS3, and Xbox 360. Now, please do not get this confused with the first-person shooter XCOM, which is still, I think, coming out supposedly next year. That's a first-person shooter. This is a strategy game. And it's by, I forget the developer's names already, Firaxis, and they worked on the Civilization Revolution series, so that kind of gives you an idea of, control-wise what to expect, because those games that they worked on for the Civ Rev games, especially on the consoles, they really got the controls down really well for an RTS on a console. And the same can be said about this, but what makes XCOM so enjoyable is it gives you the option to play this game with an Iron Man difficulty, which essentially means when your characters die, they're gone for good, and you can't reload saves. So you play with one save file, and if you make mistakes, well, then you can't reload. And this is the kind of game where you can play it for 20 or 30 hours and get so screwed in terms of finances that you have to restart the entire game over. Now, I haven't gotten to that point yet. I am playing on normal difficulty on Iron Man settings, so I am not able to reload saves. But that's what makes this game so great as a strategy game, is that every little movement that you do in the battlefield, and I should say, this is themed around UFOs and aliens and everything first. And the premise is you're part of the XCOM project, where all the countries in the world sort of finance you to combat the aliens. Admittedly, the story in this game is almost non-existent. It's almost insignificant to the point of it doesn't even matter what the story is. But just as a basis for the gameplay, all the countries in the world fund you as long as you protect them. So you have to send satellites and interceptors to guard, say, like Asia and Africa, and all these countries, Japan, China. And if they get shot, if their panic level gets too high, you'll lose their funding. And if that happens, you get less money to upgrade your units, upgrade your equipment, You know, you have to make really critical decisions like, man, should I invest in this upgrade for my armor, or should I invest more money into building a satellite, or should I invest more money into expanding my research facilities, or should I put more money into this or that? And the thing is, with XCOM, you never have enough money to do everything that you need to do, so it's really critical thinking. And in my file, my first game right now, a couple of countries have already bailed on me, so I'm in dire situations right now, and I will get a game over eventually. I don't foresee myself completing my first playthrough. But that's the fun in it, you know, when I'm in battle and, you know, you have an 80% chance to hit an alien between life and death between your best unit. You know, I could have spent 10 hours building this guy up or more, and, you know, you can get one-shotted in this game quite easily, and you lose the character, there's nothing you can do about it. There's different character classes that you can level up with their own skill trees, so you have like a medic, an assault class, a heavy, and a sniper. You can level them up in their own certain ways, and towards the end of the game, no spoilers, but there's some really awesome upgrades you can give to your units. This is without a doubt one of the surprise hits for me for this year, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this is within like my top 3 favorite games, based on what I've played so far. There's still a lot coming out this year, but that's how much XCOM has impressed me. So I highly recommend it for anybody that's a fan of strategy games. And if you can, please try and play it on Iron Man. I think that's just the best way to play the game, because it just, you have such an attachment to your characters and your decisions that's unlike anything I've played with any other RTS game out there. Alright, next is Persona 4 Arena for the Xbox 360. You guys know I'm a pretty big Persona fan. Persona 4, I should say, in particular. And I was really looking forward to this game, but you know, I think I have finally come to the conclusion that I'm going to take a long break from fighting games. You know, graphic-wise and everything, this game looks beautiful, music is excellent, you know. Everything about a fighting game that I like, similar to the BlazBlue series, which, hey, this is Arc System Works worked on this as well as BlazBlue. It has everything that you'd look for in a 2D fighter. However, you know, when I go online and I'm fighting these fighting game veterans and that's all they do is play this game for 10 hours a day, it gets to the point where I think I'm done with fighting games. Single player wise, this game does deliver if you're into a really in-depth story, because let's just say that the first like 45 minutes to an hour that I played story mode, I didn't do a single fight. So it's a continuation after the events of Persona 4. And it's all like static screens and character portraits talking, and it gives a lot of backstory and everything, and a lot of character development. It's really good if you're looking for a Persona 4 continuation of the story. But for those of you that want to get into the thick of things and just fight it out in story mode, you're going to want to play the sort of abridged mode, which is arcade mode, where they'll give very, very brief story elements before you get into the fights. But I didn't play this as much as I thought I would, to be honest. I mean, they make it appear like it can be played by, you know, casual fighting fans by introducing a single button combo system where you just hammer on one button to unleash these massive combos. But then when you start looking into the other systems in the game, like, I don't even remember what they're called, but there's like all these different counter systems, and man, it's pretty complex. Much more so than they lead you to believe initially. The one thing that really sets this game apart from other fighting games, though, is that you have a persona with you when you fight. So not only do you have your character, but think of it as a assist system, similar to like the Marvel vs. Capcom games, only in this one, the assists are mapped to like your regular attacks. So you can keep on unleashing your persona as your assist. And if it gets damaged, it can go on a cooldown timer and you won't be able to use it for quite some time. So in that aspect, it's pretty unique, and the fighting game community has really taken on to Persona 4, and it sold a lot more copies than Atlas had planned. I just dropped the game, but that's okay. Overall, I'd highly recommend it for anybody that's in the fighting games, but for me personally, the only fighting game I plan on picking up in the next probably year or two is going to be PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, which, by the way, is a fun game. I'm playing the beta. Alright, next is a PlayStation 3 game. I'm not going to get into this too deeply because this is a review copy, and I will be putting together a review in the future for this. But that is Mugen Souls, or Mugen Souls, for the PlayStation 3. This is a game developed by Compile Heart, so think the Trinity Universe game on the PS3, or the Hyperdimension Neptunia series, or the Atelier Alchemy series. If you guys are familiar with those RPG series and you enjoy any of them, I would highly recommend you go out and pick up Mugen Souls, only because it bears a strong resemblance to that series. However, I will warn you that if you are looking for a traditional turn-based RPG, with towns and your everyday level up system and equipment system, avoid this game at all costs if you do not like overly complex menus and tutorials and gameplay elements. I mean, this game, it has not stopped in terms of tutorials. I think I'm about 6.5 hours into this right now, and the game is still piling on tutorials and new gameplay elements, and it's pretty overwhelming. But if you're into that kind of stuff where you like a really deep RPG system in terms of ways that you can combo enemies in combat, level up aspects, constant grinding, leveling up your items, it goes as far as to have elements where it sort of has this sim aspect where you have to sort of think like the Shin Megami Tensei or Persona games where you have to talk to your enemies and coerce them into come onto your side, essentially, is the easiest way to put it. That element I'm not still quite sure on, because it does tend to bog down the battles a little bit. It is really over the top. The one thing that I was really looking forward to at Mugen Souls is the really over the top battles. However, well, you know what? I'm not going to get too into it. I'm going to save it all for the review. But in a nutshell, fans of especially Hyperdimension Neptunia, definitely check out Mugen Souls. But if you're the kind of person that doesn't like overly complex RPGs, you kind of just like your Final Fantasy kind of games, this is not turn-based, by the way. It's sort of like real-time, turn-based at the same time. Think Hyperdimension Neptunia Mark II. That's the easiest way to put it. You might want to do your research on Mugen Souls first before a purchase. Alright, next up is a game on the Wii, and that is The Last Story. And the packaging for The Last Story, by the way, Xseed did a really nice job on this. Comes with an art book, soundtrack, and of course the game itself, but the packaging is just really nice on this. So thank you to Xseed for not only porting this over to the US, but giving us a game that looks phenomenal as well in the packaging. But it has been a while since I played The Last Story, so my impressions might be a little shaky in terms of story elements. So I'm not even going to get into the story because I'll probably get some things wrong, because it's been quite a bit since I played it. But I went into The Last Story almost blind. I went in, so my expectations were really low. I barely looked up any information on the game prior to playing it. And at first, it was pretty simplistic. It was a pretty easy game. But then once I got to the 3.5, 4 hour mark, the story really picked up. I mean, one of the most interesting stories that I've played in an RPG in quite a while. Really likable characters. Yes, the game still does have British voice acting. But everything just came together so well. The combat in this flows really fast. It's more of an action RPG where you can play by just tilting the joystick around to attack your enemies, so it's not like you're constantly mashing on the A button. It's a really interesting gameplay choice. So don't go into it expecting a really complex combat system. It's actually pretty simplistic, and to me it actually works really well. You have AI companions that you can only control up to one at a time, so you have to kind of pick and choose which one you want to control. The other ones will be controlled by the AI. And combat is simple, but it's fun. I think I got about 8 or 9 hours into the game, and the game isn't that long. I've heard of people beating it in 15 to 20 hours. And it's just a really great adventure. Anybody out there that's looking for an excellent story in an RPG, fast gameplay, really impressive graphics, there is some problems with slowdown from time to time. It also is a pretty linear game, so don't expect, being able to roam around too much on your free will. But enemy designs, gameplay, music is beautiful. You definitely want to check out The Last Story. I do want to go back and try and finish this before the end of the year, so hopefully in a future episode of games I played recently I'll be able to give you a little bit better impressions, because it's been like a couple of months since I played it. Alright guys, and that's going to do it for part 1 of this episode of games I bought recently. In part 2, I've got games such as Code of Princess to talk about on the 3DS, Hatsune Miku Project Diva F, a couple of new Super Famicom games, a stack of new Sega Genesis reproduction titles, as well as one of the strangest games I've ever played on the PlayStation 1. Stay tuned for part 2. I hope to get that up within the next week. So, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you all soon.